수행,
동행,
수행,
The theme of today's meeting is scaling your startup internationally. For many startup businesses, there comes a crucial time when they begin to consider scaling and expanding into international markets. This is an exciting time for any startup as it opens up a world of opportunities. So how can you ensure success? So that is the theme of today's meeting. So thank you, Hanno and 지상철 교수님 and Gary for joining the meeting today. And I'll leave the mic to Professor G.
First question, in Korea, in order to revitalize the startup ecosystem, the government is running a program that directly supports startup fund to startups. What's the situation in other countries? How about the United States or Finland about that?
Sure. Well, it's a pleasure being on this panel with both of you. And by way of background, I've been teaching entrepreneurial finance and venture capital in the United States for about 17 years. And so my experience also comes as a practitioner. So I've been a co-founder of several companies, and I've been a very active investor in entrepreneurs, in particular younger entrepreneurs. I'm based in the Midwest, western part of the United States, and it's a little bit different here. We have a lot more government support for entrepreneurship in the Midwest, as opposed to the West Coast, San Francisco, and sort of Los Angeles and San Diego, that area, or New York or Boston. So there's a lot of startup activity that's naturally, organically happening on the coasts, but in the Midwest, as we're moving away from manufacturing, and we're moving into the information economy. We are experiencing a lot more support at the state levels, but then also local and the cities putting together programs, financial assistance programs, co-working spaces where it's free to go work somewhere. So we're seeing a lot of subsidies and help here in the middle part of the United States.
I have another question about that.
Sure.
Is it right? How about the hardware company or software company? Is it the same situation about that?
Yeah, software companies are doing very, very well. There's a big movement in the United States of automating lots of business tasks. So software to automate accounting, to automate human resources, to automate the sales process, the customer service process. So there's a big boom in software companies. The computer and the hardware companies, that's seems like it's either going up or going down. It's, you have your basic mainstay companies, but it feels like sometimes the market could be pretty crazy there. So I don't know exactly where hardware is right now. I don't feel like, from what I've read, I don't feel like it's going up. I think it's kind of,
Is it possible for your country to supply software engineer to the startups?
You know who does that? Google, Amazon, Microsoft, they all have kits where they provide software packages for startups. The government isn't providing much in the way of software.
So as to Finland, first of all, my perspective is that of a professor of international business in the business school. where IT is like global strategies and globalization of companies and so on. But for the first 10 years of Aalto, which started 2010, I was vice president for a sector that comprised like innovation and corporate collaboration and entrepreneurship activities and so on. So that's where I had a chance to look into the startups and their global growth and so on. So first of all, in this country, which is small, 5 million people, so 10% of South Korea, there's a long history of government supporting technology development for decades, rather successfully, perhaps. But only rather recently, like 15 years ago, it started to go further in the sort of value chain towards really commercial activities and innovation and so on. So quite a lot of money is spent, and for technology startups, it's relatively easy to get governmental support. When you talk of like hundreds of thousands of US dollars, but historically in this country, once you needed the millions and tens of millions, going got tough, because this is a small country. The capital markets are not, or venture capital markets are not like in the US. So it was more difficult to get those millions and tens of millions when you really started to go to markets. That has become better. The technology development support is still there, but now thanks to perhaps like certain role models, certain startups that have been valued up to 10 billion US dollars, now the risk investment is coming to this part of the world as well. So regularly, people from Silicon Valley and, Hong Kong, Singapore, London, wherever, take a look at this market, and now getting funding is much, much easier. But that has been historically the challenge, and only like the last 10 to 15 years, it has become much easier to get other than government funding for promising startups here. But we have interesting stories, like one university-based company, it's a satellite company called ICEYE, started as a student project. 22, 23-year-old students built nanosatellites at Aalto University. Then they went into our new collaboration program with Stanford called Stanford Technology Ventures Program, and we established our own Aalto Ventures Program, AVP. And then they got some funding from the governmental agencies, and then now they have received something like 150 million US dollars of venture capital and are operating globally already. And by the way, 2 years ago exactly, met President Moon of South Korea when he came to our campus, and we were really proud to show this startup. So there are these good stories, and I think you need role models and encouragement, and kind of to create the spirit that, yeah, it's possible to do what they do in San Francisco area, or over here in the north. You can do things on a global scale.
Thank you for your inspiration. Maybe I have another question about that. In case of Korea government supply startup fund to the foreign startups in Korea. How about in Finland?
Well, the government realizes that we need, smart people globally from wherever to bring expertise and spirit and energy and drive and whatever into our ecosystem here. So we try to make like bureaucracy very smooth to get people from, Asia or Americas to move into here and establish companies and be entrepreneurs. We still have some challenges in terms of how long it takes to get your visas and so on, but it has been realized that this is global activity, and it is highly unlikely that all the movers and shakers would happen to be among the 5 million Finns. There's another 7 billion out there. So yeah, I think this global view is gradually really being realized in all the governmental sectors as well.
So the second question was, there are many factors that make investment decisions for startups. Technology, profitability, marketability, and the competence of founders are being discussed as evaluation factors. Among them, what is the most critical factor in making investment decisions for early stage startups?
How about America? In case of Y Combinator, have you heard about Y Combinator?
Who is the founder of Y Combinator, wrote a blog post maybe 10 years ago that said the one thing that you are looking out for early stage companies. Now, when excuse me, when we're talking about, as Hanu pointed out, later stage and big capital, now you're evaluating technology, you're evaluating markets, you're looking at a whole host of execution types of factors. But at the earliest stages of a startup, typically the idea is still kind of being flushed out. The market and then the product market fit, you're trying to figure out your product and then a market for it. So those are secondary to this factor, which is, are the founders competent and are they likely to quit? because startups are hard, and if you don't get it done the first time, many quit versus breakthrough. And typically startups find their success at the breakthrough period, not they don't discover something initially and they're lucky, right? So it's a series of fighting through early setbacks, and you want to invest in entrepreneurs and founders that really believe in the problem that they're solving. If they believe in their solution and the solution doesn't work, then they quit. But if they believe in solving the problem, then they're open to any solution and they'll try different things. So that's what we look for. That's what I look for.
The same is Y community and the Korea startup situation. But nowadays, the most important factor to evaluate startups is startup competency, execution. Two different types of factors in Korea.
Right.
Yeah.
Comment from what I've sort of learned. I'm not an investor myself, but learned from the sidelines, so to speak. All those factors that were mentioned, but one way to put it is really the team. Do they have the energy and perseverance and drive? There are a lot of good ideas, but is the team a good combination of talent and skills and personalities, and do they work really well? The core team, do they work as a team well? That has been very much emphasized over here.
Yes, and typically, a single founder, there's a lot more risk in a single founder than there is in 2 or 3 co-founders. And that gets to the point of the team, right? That the earliest, that's your earliest team are your co-founders. So, I think that's pretty much across the world, the same thing.
In case of IT startups might be if the team have no software engineer, how do you do that about it?
Yes. Well, that's hard.
It's very hard.
Hard.
Yeah.
That's hard. I would also go back to what Y Combinator's model is. They don't care about your idea. They don't care, where you are in that development process, but they do care if you have someone on your team that is a full stack developer or a technical co-founder. They won't accept founders without a team. They won't accept a team that does not have a technical co-founder. So I guess your first, if I personally am not a developer, and if I wanted to start a company, I guess my first sale would be I'd have to find a technical co-founder who believes in me or believes in this idea. and then that's probably the first thing that I have to do is you have to bring someone on your team.
Yeah, that's right. That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll move on to the next question. So universities also play a very important role in the startup market. In the future, what kind of infrastructure should a university have to build an ecosystem that supports startups?
Why not? I could start. And well, I think one approach is to see it as a kind of an omni-channel thing. There is no one silver bullet, but you have to do many things simultaneously. For starters, make entrepreneurship and startup kind of a career visible in education, or bring it up in research as well, and all the collaboration that the university does with the rest of the society, be that public sector or company corporate collaboration. So I think one way to put it is that universities could advance like entrepreneurship by being inspirational, and then another point is like skills and capabilities, and also providing networks. So I think one of our actors put it that way: inspiration, skills, and networks. So you cannot probably really teach somebody to be an entrepreneur, but you can inspire and coach and mentor and encourage and all that. So that's one approach. But then what we found here, and for background, our new university really changed the mood in this small country and the society. And 15 years ago, all the graduates wanted to go and work for large corporations. That's probably very much like in South Korea. And now working for a startup or setting up your own companies is really a significant option for technology and business graduates. So there's been a huge change. So what I would like to emphasize also is that you need to have infrastructure in the universities. If you just tell people that it would be cool if you establish companies and do cross-disciplinary stuff and develop business ideas and so on, and then the question is, well, like where? And if the answer is cafeteria, that's not a good answer. So what we provided actually a lot of physical spaces, different things, we call them over here design factory or startup sauna and startup centers, thousands of square meters, so tens of thousands of square feet. And now we have in the center of the campus, we have probably the largest startup kind of premises on any campus. It's about 25,000 square meters, a 250,000 square foot premises for startups. We have today 150 startups in the middle of the campus. So you need also like significant infrastructure to make it easy and appealing and so on for students, but also researchers to get into entrepreneurial activities. So that's important. And I would like to emphasize that we started with like students in bachelor's, master's level, but now we are much more into like, postdocs and young doctors. And we have a program called like From Lab to Market. And the title goes like, I got a PhD, what's next? And really try to encourage young doctors to take the research in science into commercial activities. And of course, that's hard, but for that you need like investments in the infrastructure and premises and programs and so on. So a lot of things you can do and probably need to do to encourage.
I have just one question about that. How many cases do your university supply technical patent to the startups?
Well, all that depends on the legislation, of course. In this country, legislation gives the university a lot of rights for intellectual property, but we are very sort of liberal as a university. We kind of, with very liberal terms, give it back to the startups. And related to that, we do not actively seek ownership in companies founded around the university and our people, but sometimes we can take a very, very small ownership in exchange for certain IP, but that's like, you know, a few percent and so on. But I guess in every country the legislation is a big factor here, and then you need to go by the rules. But we tend to take a very liberal approach, thinking that university is not perhaps the best actor to commercialize things, but business people and investors and entrepreneurs are.
No. In case of technical patent, how about conditions between your university and the startups?
Well, we have, I guess, like most universities, tech transfer office and tries to help our researchers a lot in filing patents and then maybe licensing IP. So if that's what you meant, but overall, I think our university approach is rather, you know, liberal, because it's better that somebody goes and does something with IP rather than university hoarding it.
Yeah, I see.
I can speak a little bit to the universities here in the United States. First, let me just say that learning how to be an entrepreneur is a very expensive proposition if you're doing it through the university and you're a student. So I personally don't, I agree with you, Henry. I don't believe that you can systematize entrepreneurship and teach it as in a way that it's a natural evolution to you just, because there's so many factors that go into play to be an entrepreneur. The thing that is very limiting, in my opinion, at the university level, that we find like a lot of young kids will leave the university to go start their companies, is you have to sort of think outside the box, and you have to have a view of the world that's different than what it is today. Because if you're trying to revolutionize a world that you already see today, you probably have already you've already probably lost the game, right?
Yeah.
So you have to be in a place where you're thinking outside and you're looking at things differently than where the conditioning is. That being said, I love the programs that you have in Finland. We do have here at the Indiana University, we do have a co-working space where people can just come and gather. And even if they're not ready to be an entrepreneur, they can come and gather and be a part of a programming where they're bringing in speakers. Again, to your point, inspiration, you know, so they'll bring in alumni to speak about their experience as an entrepreneur or speak about an industry. And I think that's incredibly helpful for young kids to have mentors and people that they've seen that have done that, and learn from them as much as you know, just having a co-working space and they're trying to figure things out for themselves. I think it was Jack Ma who said very clear. I love his formula. He said, in your 20s, work for someone else because you can learn from them. In your 30s, you can start a company in any industry. In your 40s, if you start a company, you have to start a company in an industry that you're an expert at. And then in your 50s, let all the young people run it because they can do better. So there's a great opportunity to have this sort of entrepreneurs that are in their established industry, they're experts, sort of that, you know, late 40s, to find a way to connect them with young people who want to be entrepreneurs, who could go work as mentees in that business. And so I'm seeing more and more alumni that are recruiting, that are entrepreneurs, that are recruiting and hiring young people as interns to work in the summer to give them that entrepreneurial experience. And I think that's a wonderful way for young people to gain real world experience as an entrepreneur, but yet under the guidance of an established entrepreneur who knows what he or she is doing.
Sounds, may I ask, sorry, kind of add one more element, continuing what the US experience was about the young people's role. What we've learned, and which has been tremendous energy, is that you trust your young students, that those in their early 20s don't interfere too much from the university side, but just give them the premises, give them some budget, and they can do wonders. And I just realized that about 10 years ago, two of the young students, 21, 22, came to me and they asked for some, empty rooms to start up activities. And now both of them are entrepreneurs, founded companies. One is valued about $1 billion and the other one is about $500 million. And that was only because, here's the keys, you use that empty garage, whatever, and do something, and don't worry, we'll give you some budget money to get things started. So probably the best investment the university ever did, not interfering.
I have another question about that. The external market expert to open the participation in the United States startup program?
Yes, and they tend to work with their alumni primarily. There's, like for example, the Indiana University, it's a global school. Our business school, we have 250,000 alumni of the business school spread out all over the world. And it's an incredible network to recruit from or pull from to provide expertise and technical assistance back to our younger entrepreneurs, and we're seeing that happen already. This happens all the time in Stanford or Harvard, that you see these sort of alumni, big reinvestments in the young people, financial and otherwise, networking and connections, to give them the best possible shot at succeeding. So that's a very healthy. It's a very healthy dynamic that happens here in the United States.
In the case of university, technically, the infrastructure is the good, but there are few people who have actually started their business. There is a limit to commercialization support in the United States. Is it right?
Yes. Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say is that we could have infrastructure, but we don't. Too few people have the technical experience to help these startups grow. And I would say that's relatively true. And to go back to Hanu's point, it's like sometimes the best thing you could do is just get out of their way and let them build their companies, but yet take advantage of the infrastructure. So I've never, in my experience, seen programs at the university levels that are providing lots of technical expertise. I think all the entrepreneurs sort of have to kind of learn. They're going to have to build their own business and lean on the university for infrastructure, but not necessarily technical assistance.
All right. How about Finland about that?
Well, perhaps this is not a direct answer, but I think it's relevant anyway. So seldom you have within the university the best people for boosting startups and so on, but you have to invite like experienced entrepreneurs, and that's our experience. So the students are the sort of a dynamo. They organize things, but then they invite people in their 40s and 50s from all over the world. I think we had a network of about 50 to 100 very experienced entrepreneurs who had exited companies and were wealthy, and they were willing to share their experiences on a pro bono basis. All they flew into Helsinki from San Francisco, wherever, and had a couple of days with the startups and student teams and sparring and mentoring and so on. So I think important for universities is to realize that the wisdom is not typically within the university, but it's out there, and trust rather those who have been there and seen that.
Yeah, the same as Korea.
So we'll move on to the next question. So it's the second last question today. So in Korea, I'm reading from this. So in Korea, accelerators are playing a full-fledged role in the startup market. However, most of the roles in the operation of programs for startups are still largely limited in seed investment in the early stage. How far should core role of an accelerator expand in order to be efficient?
Well, in the United States, we've had a lot of success with accelerators, and starting with Y Combinator, and then Techstars, and then Techstars. Yeah, and they started the Global Accelerator Network, and now I think there's hundreds of accelerators now throughout the world. And the advantage of an accelerator, even though if you're not getting a lot of money, if you're not getting much technical expertise, then the primary advantage of an accelerator is it forces a team to focus within a certain amount of time to get something accomplished. And so maybe the accelerator, you don't leave an accelerator with a full product and ready to go to business, but at least one milestone that you needed to achieve in order to move the business along. And I think accelerators can provide that sort of discipline where most teams, maybe without the accelerators, they're kind of sitting around trying to figure out what to do. The accelerator can help them bring focus to accomplish something important for their startup. So I think accelerated programs should continue to increase. And I think we should even start thinking about accelerators for even, at least here in the United States, at the high school level. Just to give young people experience and understanding, kind of the focus and the discipline that you need to have to be an entrepreneur.
I suppose the view from Finland would be very similar, that there needs to be kind of discipline and structure and certain time period. And I suppose the point is that that very business idea might not fly, but it is a tremendous learning experience anyway. And it might be the second or third company and business idea that then takes off. So how to define failure is a good question here. Maybe it's not a failure if you learn it tremendously.
Right. Yeah, I would agree about the definition of failure. I think that it needs to be not reimagined, but it needs to be redefined for society. I think we place way too much pressure on young people not to fail, and when we do that, it dampens their entrepreneurial spirit. It increases their fear, and I don't think that we are much doing a good job of helping them become creators if they're worrying about that, somehow this doesn't work and that they're going to be looked upon in society as something less than. I completely agree with you.
By the way, can I just note on the larger side, in this country, this student movement for entrepreneurship, they actually proposed a national failure day to make the point that it's okay to try and fail if you learn. And
Right.
that's a pretty good idea.
I guess that's related to the last question we have. So in the global market, it is somewhat conservative to invest in foreign startups. What is the most intensive preparation for Korean startups to be invested by global investors?
Well, I think Hanu made the point earlier that money's coming into Finland, for example, from all over, right? From the United States, from Singapore, Hong Kong, because venture capital, it's interesting. Venture capital in the United States, there are only 11,000 venture capitalists. Now, we have a population of 350 million people. So we have, and venture capital is a very, very small niche globally. And so there's a lot of money in the hands of a very few people, and what they're looking for, if they could find it in Korea, or they find it in Finland, or they find it in Spain, or they find it in the United States, they're looking for those companies that can go from 0 to $1 billion in valuation within 5 years. Now, we all know that the odds of going from a 0 to $1 billion valuation, it is a 0.1% chance. It's a very, very small odds. So, in my opinion, that there are a lot of startups that get overlooked, very quality companies getting overlooked by the venture capital industry, and I think that there's going to be a revolution in the way venture capital is. I think there's going to be a venture capital 2.0, and I think it's already happening with crowd equity funding. I don't know but if we truly want to change our ecosystems and expand our ecosystems, we got to change the way that capital is being administered, and who controls that capital and where that capital comes from. And so I think in Korea, the Korean citizens should be supporting Korean startups. In the United States, in the Midwest here, Midwest residents should be supporting Midwest startups. We shouldn't be waiting for capital to come from San Francisco or Boston to come in here. We need to have a system where we can spread risk out, high risk, high return out to a point where the math no longer is against us. So let me just say this last thing. AngelList, which is a big startup investing platform here in the United States, has shown through numerous studies of past investments that a successful startup investing portfolio should be 25 companies at least.
Yeah.
Right. So how can you have the average person be able to invest in 25 startups? You'd have to allow them to invest just a small amount of money into each of those startups. But with today's technology and decentralized finance, you can create that platform where now this is a wealth creation opportunity for the citizens of Korea. There's a wealth creation opportunity for the citizens of Finland, or here in the Midwest, because all it takes is 1 or 2 successful startups out of that 25 to pay for all of your losses. I know that's a long-winded answer to the question, but I believe we need to reimagine capital, because I don't think it's efficient. I don't think it scales globally, and I think too few people control our innovation in this world.
If I try to add to those wise words, I would bring into discussion the scale. Of course, scalability is one thing that investors always care about. So US, of course, huge domestic market, but Korea only like what 15% of that, and Finland is a tiny market, for instance. So from a smaller country, you always would need to think globally, and that brings into the equation the core team, the founders having kind of a global mindset and ability to understand business environments elsewhere. Just as an example, Korea mobile solutions and social media related stuff and so on. Overall in Asia, everything is mobile, very advanced, but there might be a perfect need for it in Latin America. But if you've never been there, if you don't speak any Spanish, how could you know about it? So I think the Brits put it that to be well traveled, I think that applies here as well. Knowing about differences in the world and business environments and societies and things that are very often kind of neglected, like understanding cultures and even languages, kind of trivial things, but they are not. So increases the opportunities tremendously if the founders, the students and graduates are globally aware and traveled and know about, industries and economies in different parts of the world. Well, so I would bring in this kind of a hazy, softer side of things. And I think in the successful startups over here, you can see that the founders are very globally minded, and they have no problem flying into Tokyo or flying into Mexico City or Sao Paulo and talk with potential investors and clients. But you can't do it unless you have been trained a little bit for that.
Yeah. I have just one question about that. Platform business startups have advantage to receive foreign investment compared to the other business.
I think they're the most successful companies ultimately, but they're very hard to build. When you want to be the platform for a particular industry or technology, I think that becomes very challenging to achieve. And I don't think we see a lot of companies, at least in my experience, that are able to achieve that before they're they get acquired or they exit out of the business. Like, for example, Apple is a platform business, Microsoft is a platform business, Cisco. I think most of these companies get that would ever have a chance for it, they get acquired before they become a platform business. So I don't see a lot of them. Here in the United States, I will say marketplaces are becoming very, very popular. Very hard to build, but some of the most expensive or the most successful exits have occurred through marketplaces. And then of itself, the marketplace becomes its own platform.
But maybe compared to the other country, the Korea market is very small compared to the other country. It is very difficult for Korean platform startups to receive a foreign investment.
So I'm not against. Yeah. So let me rephrase. I'm not against companies receiving foreign investment, and I agree with Anu about globally minded companies. I think in today's world, post-pandemic, everyone should be thinking globally.
Yeah.
And everyone should be thinking building a global team, and having actual feet on the street in other markets around the world, while being, say, based in the United States or based in Seoul or based in Finland or whatever. What I was saying earlier about the capital markets is that when all your startups are receiving foreign investment, all of that wealth is being exported out of your country.
Yeah.
And you know what? That doesn't help you. If all that wealth stayed in the country, that wealth get invested into future entrepreneurs. So if you've looked at any successful ecosystems out there, like San Francisco, the wealth stayed in San Francisco, and it was reinvested into the employees and future entrepreneurs. In the Midwest, all of our successful companies, we took in foreign investment, as in from the West Coast and the East Coast. All that money left, all of it left.
Yeah.
That doesn't help. It's a short-term gain for those companies, but it's not a long-term solution to if you're trying to build something, an infrastructure for your country. It just doesn't work. We need to be we're global companies, but capital should be local as well, not just global capital.
Yeah.
So right now we have a question from Professor Gary. Both Professor G or Professor Hannu can address it. So the question was, at what age should we be introducing entrepreneurship to young people?
In the first 10 years, entrepreneurship education was focused on the college students. But after 2 years ago, entrepreneurship education has been activated in elementary schools or middle schools and high schools. Moreover, as the government supports the startup support as one of the policy for the young unemployed recently.
Just to comment from the Finnish perspective, probably already rather early when you are, 10 to 15, but I wouldn't call it teach it. What we've tried to do here as a university, for instance, now we have 2 senior high schools that moved onto our campus. And there are, I don't know how this is, that's a large number of students. They are some of the largest high schools in the country. And we have established a program we call Aldo Junior. So we collaborate with the high school students in many, many ways, natural sciences and business and whatever. There's a bit of a entrepreneurial stuff, but I guess it's not like teaching, but narrowing the gap between students in, junior high school, senior high school and university, and mixing with university students. So maybe they get bit by this entrepreneurial bug and get inspired, and in their further studies have startup as an option. So I guess it goes back to kind of inspiration and role models rather than very systematic education.
Here in the U.S., we've certainly entrepreneurship is being taught in the college or the higher education level. There are programs, not necessarily through the high schools, but through clubs that are promoting entrepreneurial activity at the high school level. We haven't gone. We haven't really established anything in terms of higher education or education standards around entrepreneurship. We are unfortunately, we're pretty much a sort of a read. We have standards and standardized tests to teach us how to read and write, which are good things, and teach math and science and the STEMs, but we don't do anything with our young people about teaching them how to be creative. A lot of the arts programs and those and the music, they're there, but they're not required. We don't require art. We don't require you have to play music. But those are the things that bring creativity. I think, in my opinion, that the United States is far behind other parts of the globe when it comes to positioning our young people for entrepreneurship and starting companies and building new things.
Thank you, Gary. So we'll move on to Professor Hannu's question to Professor G. All of you can comment afterwards. So it's a 2-tier question. So the first part is, Are the universities in Korea providing the right kind of tools for those students showing interest in either working in a startup or founding a company themselves? And as for international growth, what can universities in Korea do to lower the barrier of startups to go abroad?
For first question, my answer is Korea University provides startup with various programs such as education, mentoring, accommodation, technology transfer, patent support, and market development. However, the efficiency of the programs provided is not satisfactory due to the small size of domestic market. The second answer is about in order to advance into the global market at the government level, we have established the startup centers in major countries to support fund technology and space. Currently, we are offering a separate global support program where global companies such as Microsoft, Google, Nvidia, and Amazon directly participate to support the startups overseas expansion program. 실행, 동행, 수행. Thank you for your
Thank you very
patience.
much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.